Hi, I'm Laura McMahon-Higgins. Welcome back to Nasty or Necessary, the series where we examine common clauses from commercial construction contracts to answer the question, is it necessary or just plain nasty? Today we are going to discuss clauses which regulate the valuation of a negative variation. But before we can look at these clauses, we need to talk about what a negative variation is. A negative variation is where I, as the principal, use my variation power not to add work to the scope, but to take work away. Negative variations are often referred to as de-scoping because that's effectively what you're doing. You're taking work out of the scope of work. If a contract allows a principal to de-scope, it must also set out what effect that de-scoping will have on the contract sum. Let's talk about why this matters. Let's imagine I asked you to give me a price to build a house, and you went through the documentation and said, Laura, I can build you this house for $400,000. Then I said, okay, what can you do for me if I want 10 houses? Now your eyes light up because that's a big chunk of work for your company, and it means that your material costs will drop, therefore you can give me a more competitive price. This is basic commerce. It's known as the volume discount. The more you order, the cheaper it becomes. And that's the reason why people go to Costco to buy their washing powder in bulk. If the cost of your materials drops, you can reduce your price and still make a healthy profit. So you say to me, look, if you want 10 houses, I can do it for $350,000 a house. It's worth highlighting here that the only reason you dropped your price from $400,000 to $350,000 was the volume of work I told you would get to complete. Now let's imagine that we sign the contract. You build the first house, I pay you, and then I turn around and say, negative variation, don't build the other 9 houses. The end result is that you've built one house for $350,000, but you would never have given me that price for only one house. If there was no financial consequence to de-scoping, then there would be nothing to prevent a principal deliberately overrepresenting the volume of work on offer to access that volume discount and then simply taking that work away through a negative variation. For this reason, the common law states that a principal has to pay the contractor for the profit and overhead that relates to the de-scoped work. The clause we're going to look at today changes that common law position. This is what the clause would look like. For the purposes of valuing a variation, in valuing a decrease in the contract sum for the decrease or omission of any part of the works, such variation shall include a proportionate decrease in the contract preliminaries, and no allowance shall be made in respect of loss of profit or loss of recovery of on-site or off-site overheads. So this clause means that if 10% of the contractor's work is removed via a negative variation, the contractor cannot claim the profit and overhead that would have attached to that work. And the contract preliminaries will also be reduced by 10%. This is quite harsh. Preliminaries often include large figures for mobilisation, demobilisation, and insurance. If you take away 10% of my work, it doesn't change the cost of those 3 things. I still have to mobilise, I still have to demobilise, I still need to get insurance, but the overall preliminary figure will reduce by 10%. For that reason, and I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, these clauses weigh in at nasty. That wraps up this episode of Nasty or Necessary. If you found this helpful, please follow along for more content and sign up to our online training course today. I can teach you to spot the nasty clauses in the contract before you sign them. It really is true that a tiny bit of training now will save you millions in the future.